Can you hear? Can you hear? Can you hear? Can you hear? Can you hear?
Got a little bit of a lag. Let's see.
Can you hear? Hello, hello, hello.
Let's see if it'll catch up. It's been lagging.
Can you hear? Can you hear?
All right, let's see. Did Beth just walk back from the Bima?
About 10 minutes ago.
Oh, I hear it.
Okay.
I got it. You're good.
All right.
All right. Thanks, KJ.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Hi, Eva. Oh, good, thanks. How are you? Yes. Kind of just started. Wasn't windy when we left.
Get in here.
Assistant to my stolen temporary to my son, my younger son, as well as expression. It was like to bring his You could have bought Jim's. Yes.
I'm going to move this right behind you, ladies, okay? Thank you. Yeah.
You stayed with them all night? You came in the family car?
Pardon me?
Yes, I did. You know,
Steve Stark?
No, it's not so bright.
Jimmy could have.
Right, yeah, we'll go right this way.
Good and even.
She says it is. See, she didn't just say that. Right.
Supposedly we're getting not very stable. I was holding it down. It's not very stable. My goodness. Now it'll be stable if you're sitting on it. This is this wind makes sound.
Hey, Steve, how are you? Wanna see?
Screaming. I mean, I guess it's especially last spring at the beginning. I mean, I guess yesterday. If I win, it's just.
Linda runs.
No, it's fine. My daughter-in-law is so sick. Have you seen my mom? Yeah, it's coming though. It's coming. She's seriously.
The other day, Nobody can agree with you. But you go find the show. Or talk. And I'm- I certainly can. Yeah, I thought for 5 seconds.
Very important.
This, I do this.
Yeah.
Is there by chance an extra chair for my
Oh,
daughter?
that's good. Sorry, I'm looking at you.
Oh, you are. Yes, he did.
Yeah. Does. I've always seen this section. I'm gonna go over there with it.
Look like this is familiar. Tilton is where my friend went to I went down the way, and I went to and Erasmus, Madison, and Dillon were the three, and Erasmus
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've been asked to be a blogger, can you leave in the rear of the
So, wow, so where did you live going to Tilburg? I used to live So you went to- Oh, that's interesting. Ocean. Very.
Masks are tricky these days, but it's Patrice Lara. Nice to see you.
My ex-husband was Joe.
I'm a hugger. I'm a hugger, yeah, but that's a, yeah.
Yeah, we've all learned new
I
protocols.
know. And right at this time of when you're transitioning, it's, whew, it just makes it more interesting.
I have allergies.
Of course. Oh,
They
yeah.
only listen. So Mike and Ross lived our block. And we were very good friends. We have
Memorial brings us together.
It's also-
But I did.
Your husband? Yes. Yes, the biggest guy.
Right.
Large animals. Ducks have a path to It's a big thing. Yeah. Or falling. Sorry for these circumstances.
Are you doing okay, John? Yes.
ask those who have ribbons on to rise. So, friends, we are about to begin. If I could have everyone close. So we need to come in close within social distance. So just a moment, we're going to have the kriya, which means tearing. The kriya is performed by child, sibling, spouse, and there's lots of reasons we do this. Number one, we're physical beings, and when we have a loss, we feel a need sometimes to do something physical. So the act of tearing changes nothing, but it feels like something we should do. It's a symbol of the tear in the fabric of your family, the fabric of your life, and the fabric of our entire community. So we tear. It's coming, right? And thirdly, perhaps most importantly, up until this moment, your job has been taking care of details. Once you tear, your job is to let us take care of you. For hearts that are torn, we perform this act of kriya, this act of tearing. I'm going to ask those with ribbons to please repeat after me. Adonai Natan. Adonai Matach. Shem Adonai Torah. God has given. Blessed be the name of God. Baruch atah Adonai. Dayan. Amen. Praise you, Adonai. Let's all say. Amen. We begin with the 121st Psalm. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your coming and your going, now and forever. Death has taken a beloved Mike Altenberg. And our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Mike's love that united us in life, and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path, which continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and mind that brought joy and happiness, now a precious remembrance. For his love of family and community. For his philanthropy. For his wonderful laugh. For the ways he made this community a better place. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. And in this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scripture that brings us the ever new message of God's nearness. Tells of our kinship with the Creator, and light as in darkness, and joy as in sorrow, life as in death. The 23rd Psalm, perhaps more than any, has brought so much comfort to so many over the ages. I'm going to ask Cantor Sachs to chant it in the Hebrew, and I'll read it in English. And if you know it or even bits and pieces of it, please join with me in the English. Cantor?
Adonai, holy, lo echsar, bino tesher bitzeni, almei benuchot, almei benuchot, Nafshi Yeshovet, Yeshovet, Yoncheni b'mod Yitzareh, Yoncheni b'mod Yitzareh, Yavon Shemo. One Kiel Begets Amara, Gloria Yatai Madi, Shiftecha Umishantecha Hela Haruch lefanai, shulchan neged sorai. Kishanta Lashem Eloshi Chosi Revaya Ach Tov Chesed Yudefuni Kol Yemei Chayai, Kol Yemei Chayai, V'shorti b'Elonai le'orach Adonai Roi Lo Echzor Adonai Roi
Join with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, and restores my soul. He guides me in straight path for the sake of his name. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Libby has asked if Cantor Sax could sing, and I could accompany her on a piece of music that really encapsulates Mike's life. So we will.
Now the end is here, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full, I've traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, and saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times I'm sure you knew when I did all more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all and I stood tall and did it my way.
Thank you. In his sorrow, Job cried out in the words that we said just a few moments ago when we tore the Kriya ribbons. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach v'Hishem Adonai mevorach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, but the centuries have taught us that the Keter Shem Tov, the crown of a good name, endures beyond the grave, and that there is strength in faith. And so with Job, we say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given. You gave us Mike Altenberg. will not be forgotten. And for all that was good and enduring in Mike's life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. God, you've taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love. As we now say, Yishem Adonai Mevorach Me'atati Adolam, blessed be the name of God now and forever. We would ask that we take just a few moments now of silent prayer as we remember Mike and the souls that he touched. We pray in silence.
One of the things that we know about Mike is how much he loved coming to Shabbat Unplugged at Temple Emmanuel. And so in that spirit and in his honor, we sing this arrangement of this beautiful poem about memory and loss that we have been using in our services for the past year and a half, about the power of memory and what does it mean to remember as we move through time and remember Mike. The rising of the sun we remember, in the blowing of the wind we remember, in the opening of buds we remember, we remember. In the blueness of the sky we remember, in the rustling of the leaves we remember, as the year starts and it ends we remember, we remember. When we're weary and need strength we remember, when we're lost and sick at heart we remember, when the joys we earn share we remember, we remember. So long as we live, day to shine, they are now a part of us. They are now a part of us. They are now a part of us. As we remember, we remember, we remember.
And I want to call on Jeremy to say a few words on behalf of all of the grandchildren.
Good morning. I'm Jeremy, and as the fifth eldest grandson, I've been called on to speak on behalf of all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Dan, Maria, Ben, Jared, Matt, Gabby, Jack, and Evan. To us, our grandpa was Popeye, as in the cartoon spinach-eating sailor man. Ben at first called him Papa Mike, but Jared forever changed that when he was born, couldn't pronounce his M's, and thus Papa Mike became Popeye. As our grandpa, Popeye was a comedian, adventurer, arts enthusiast, and mentor. Popeye always loved the mountains and made sure we did too. Jared recalls numerous sailing trips out on Lake Dillon, in which Popeye and the adults were out on the deck, the boat listing at a precarious angle, while Jared cowered inside the cabin clutching his life jacket. Later on, Popeye bought a motorboat and taught us everything from getting the boat in and out of the dock over and over and over again, to driving it out on the lake, and how to put the license plate on upside down. You know, every corner of Lake Dillon, thanks to Popeye. One time when he was well into his 80s, he disclosed over a family dinner how he had taken the motorboat out on his own. He got stuck in a shallow part of the lake. Instead of waiting around for help, he jumped out of the boat, pushed the boat off, and hopped back in. None of the family could be angry for that long, because what stuck with us was the example of his independent and sometimes stubborn spirit. Now, not only did Popeye provide a home for us in Keystone so that we could ski in the winter and hike in the summer, he also had high aspirations for our use of the space. He made sure to tell Jared and Matt right off the bat about the workroom next to the garage when he bought the place. Our eldest cousins enjoyed this as a place to design, piece together, and paint model boats. However, Popeye's perpetual desire to renovate won out, and thus it became the dude room, bedroom and hangout space for the boys, much to Gabby's chagrin. Gotta say foosball table, but when Jared, Matt, Jack, and I were younger, we capitated all the soccer players and hit their heads around the house, and those are still being found to this day. We also all have our driving stories with Popeye. He was never afraid to let us take the lead. He made me and then Gabby drive over Loveland Pass right when we had our permits and our licenses, even in the snow. Popeye let Matt drive his brand new Prius up to the mountains and had all of us drive his boat without not only boating license, but for our driver's license. Ben only had his learner's permit when he, Popeye, and Uncle Rick took a road trip through Wyoming and South Dakota. And Ben, having just completed driver's ed, was very cautious that Popeye took to calling him Grandma Ben. Popeye also shared all his passions with us. Anywhere we went in Colorado, we'd have a story about it from his days going around the 4x4 with Buddy Schwall. He'd point out to us which buildings and bridges he constructed in his concrete business days. When Jared and later Gabby had the opportunity to go to Cheyenne, Wyoming for a speech and debate, Popeye detailed from memory which buildings he helped construct. In addition, his love for music, and specifically the National Repertory Orchestra, was another gift he shared with us, taking us along for concerts in Breckenridge weekend after weekend, year after year, despite the fact the music never really changed. But the NRO was a top-tier act, and he had a discerning eye for when it didn't quite meet his standards. For one time, he took me to a concert in Littleton. As we walked out, he remarked, "That's what I would call a second-class act." We also have to brag that Popeye expelled about each of us to friends and family. Remember how wide his smile was when Echo was born? We often had different dreams for each of us than we had. Ben, the entrepreneur, Jared, the editor of the New York Times, Matt, the United Nations translator, Jeremy, the political commentator, Gabby, the prosecutor, and Jack, the boss of all the cousins. He truly loved us and was present at graduations, birthdays, and Jewish holidays. And where we miss him dearly we know he is always with us. In fact, every time we walk into the house in Keystone, unsuspecting friends and family can be greeted by a life-size cardboard cutout right on the stairs, which has curiously remained in our lives since we were children. And Popeye was the best. His pride in us is and always will be our strength. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you. That's beautiful.
I'm going to give a disclaimer first. I did not keep your notes of the children as they wrote their remarks. So any similarities. First of all, wouldn't my dad love this wind? If you'd be out on Dylan thinking about on the boat. My dad thought he'd go out with a flourish. Always one for a party. He really wanted his beloved National Repertory Orchestra to play at his funeral in the Temple Sanctuary with many in attendance and much to say about him. All good, of course. Well, he did go out with a flourish on some level. He had not one, but 3 notices from Feldman's. And while we're gathered at his gravesite, it's not quite the send-off he anticipated. We are in person, and more important, the love and support he and we have felt from near and far over the past few months and especially weeks is palpable. It is his flourish, his crescendo, and we are grateful. My dad loved people, and he loved being around people. He was a longtime and loyal friend to many, a mentor, a provider, and a leader. In the past few days, I've received so many emails, calls, and texts about Dad's role in their lives. He encouraged people to get involved, to embark into new ventures, to grow, and to give. I remember one woman many years ago when she found out who my dad was, waxed poetic about his mentorship in the building business and how he supported her as a woman in this role. So rare for those times. He saw purpose and drive in individuals, and he reveled in their successes. He helped grow the family business, originally Promoter and Sons, into family structures, along with his father-in-law, brothers-in-law, and sister-in-law to play a major role in transforming the skylines of Denver and other southwestern cities. He was a leader in his industry, as you'll hear, and probably equally as important to him, the leader in our community. And the mentorship extended to me. When I first began raising money for nonprofit causes years ago, Dad gave me his best advice. Stand up when you make a phone call. Why, I asked. Because you can feel confident that way, upright. I took his advice, began to raise money, and to this day, I stand up for my more difficult asks. Happily, I have a standing desk in my office. The mentorship and advice extended to his beloved grandchildren, as Jeremy said. My dad was not one for exaggeration, except when it came to his grandchildren's accomplishments. For example, my nephew Ben, who's an accomplished producer and writer of documentaries, in my dad's mind, won an Oscar for his work. Jared, who at one time was doing coding for the New York Times, apparently had been promoted to the executive editor of the great movie. Matt, who now has a master's in translation, would attend school for international studies and become a diplomat. Jeremy, a CPA, would ditch his career as an accountant to become a political pundit, since they love to discuss liberal politics on MSNBC. And Gabby, his beloved granddaughter, would become a lawyer, well, maybe a politician, well, maybe if she wasn't already. You understand my point. He mentored and he dreamed for our kids, and he made many of their own educational goals possible. Who knows? Someday maybe his goals will come true for them. And my dad was spontaneous, like the time my mom came to Washington, D.C. when Jeremy was born, to help us. And simultaneously, Dad ran up to the mountains to buy the bigger house so that he could be in his beloved mountains with his expanding tent of grandchildren together. And they were. And as Jeremy talked about all the memories we shared with Mom and Dad and Libby and our extended families. The McDonald and Plotkin kids grew up together in that house, continuing to cherish their time there. My dad's spontaneity and generosity was well placed. Dad, as you'll hear, was a leader and a philanthropist. He was proud when he could contribute both his resources and his time. And there are few organizations in the Jewish community that didn't benefit from his generosity. He loved an intellectual challenge, as he found with American Jewish Committee, and his role as a facilitator in Ollie. He served on one of the first endowment committees for Allied Jewish Federation, understanding then what we now know is so powerful, the necessity of sustainability of organizations. He loved Israel, and he aligned himself with organizations in support. He became intrigued by politics and helped many folks get elected, including my own cousin. His beloved National Repertory Orchestra became a true labor of love, harkening back to his college days as a musician. And he and a few of his friends saved the orchestra more than a few times. The NRO, now Dad can proudly boast, was one of the premier orchestra training grounds for musicians. And yes, there is a Michael Altenberg Leadership Award given by the orchestra. His legacy and community goes on. And my dad found what few have, real love, with both my mom and Libby. While my siblings and I can reminisce at length over stories of dad and mom and their 50 years of love and laughter, we also have great joy that dad found love again after we lost our beloved mom. Dad and Libby shared a beautiful relationship, a relationship that transcended original families and brought them together through shared experiences. They loved music, opera, theater, and travel. They shared their children and grandchildren with each other and grew our respective families. For our kids, Libby became a grandmother as they were quite young when mom passed away. She embraced our kids as her own, and we are forever grateful. And the care that Libby exuded for dad over the past few years, many of them very difficult, was incredible. Thank you, Libby, for what you gave my dad, and of course, the love that you two shared. Above all, my dad was a mensch. He could be curmudgeonly and sometimes lack a few filters and cause us to roll our eyes on more than one occasion. His later years were hard, but when you knew him, and you had the benefit of his wisdom, his knowledge, his generosity, that impish smile, and most important, his humor, you were set. In Judaism, there's a saying that you should live to 120. And honestly, we thought he might. To imagine our world without my dad, without our Friday lunches, our family dinners, the many, many phone calls, his advice and more. The one who enabled so many of our choices that we were able to make. I can't think about it. But to imagine the world without this mensch of a man, the one who cared deeply about community and philanthropy, that is enormously difficult. We celebrate Dad's life today and know that even if this isn't exactly what he would have imagined, he's still going out with a flourish. It might not be the orchestra, but it's our music, surrounded by love and people and laughter. And again, my siblings and I are grateful.
Beautiful, Judy, Jeremy, thank you so much. Dear Libby, dear Rick and Mary, dear Jim and Carol, Barbie, and Steve and Judy and Bruce, dear Daniel, Maria and Ben, Jared, Matt and Jack and Jeremy and Gabby and Patty and Rick and Torn and Kyle, and Cole. Dear family and friends all, I want to begin with a poem by Maya Angelou. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity, memory suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent on their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period of peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly, spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses, restored never to be the same, whispered to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, but they existed. Mike Popeye Altenberg was a man whose soul, whose very presence inspired us all to be better people. As we've learned, he was a visionary and mentor to others. He was a pioneer in his industry who understood the importance of giving back to the many communities he loved. He was a builder, a philanthropist, a committed father, grandfather, husband, and dear friend to so many that you can't quantify. He could be gruff and even grumpy at times, but more often than not, he had a twinkle in his eye that belied the fact that he took great joy in sharing those moments in life when absurdity and obsession melded with friendship, destiny, and love, and as a result, great beauty and power were manifest. Mike loved Colorado. He loved to ski, bike, and hike, especially when he could do so with his beloved family and their friends. He was a voracious reader, lifelong runner, and teacher, and he saw every interaction with others as an opportunity to both learn and teach, often simultaneously. He was a musician and a patron whose dedication to the arts made it possible for the National Repertory Orchestra to both survive and thrive through difficult times. He was a sailor. He sailed on seas of tranquility and trauma, of community, family, faith. Mike was born in 1928 in Chicago. His parents, Goldie and Jerry Altenberg, raised Mike and his younger sister Ruth in a home that celebrated Jewish life, education, and creativity. His father, Jerry, was an interesting character. He was a jack of all trades, dealt in sales, furs, and came in contact with a variety of both savory and some not so savory characters. And Goldie worked as a secretary for a furniture company until she was 90 years old. Mike learned to shoot pool in Garfield Park pool halls with his dad and had lots of stories about his childhood growing up in the city, some which we cannot tell right now. And in the summers, Mike would travel to Colorado to visit his mother's best friend, who he called Aunt Belle Levine. And it was here that he learned to love the mountains and all that they had to offer. He went to school at the University of Illinois in Champaign, where he majored in business and played clarinet and saxophone in the marching band. And in the summer, playing in county fairs all throughout the Midwest. There was a shortage of good musicians during the war, so his skills were in high demand. Mike couldn't enlist due to his asthma, but what a sailor he would have been. Popeye indeed. Mike was a very handsome and dashing young man and older. He used to tell stories of how he would take trips to Northwestern and the University of Wisconsin to date all the sorority girls. He told that to Gavin. Apparently, he was in very high demand. And after graduating from the University of Illinois, he planned to move to California to make his fortune. He got on a train and made a stop in Colorado to visit Aunt Belle and the friends he'd made over the years. And he spent a little bit of time with Belle's son, Philip, who introduced him to a beautiful young woman named Roz Perlmutter. Mike was instantly smitten, and on the spot decided not to continue his trip to California after all. He stayed here in Denver, got a job working for the Lerner shops. Mike and Roz dated until 1 month after she graduated college. They were married by Rabbi Lederman. The backyard of Phil and Belle Perlmutter's house on July 15th, 1951. He started working for his father-in-law's business, Perlmutter and Sons, as we learned, which started as a concrete business. They were contractors for concrete pipe, quickly. However, the business soon morphed into reinforced concrete. He created one of the first pre-stressed concrete plants in the United States. Mike always said that they wanted to get a patent for it, but they couldn't afford to get one. They did okay. Rick was born in 1952, Jim in 1954, Barbie in 58, and Judy, baby, in 1964. The Altenbergs were 60-plus year members of Temple Emmanuel. He loved our congregation, and I loved seeing him enjoying services, especially our unplugged services on Shabbat and the holidays. Mike and Roz had a wonderful marriage. They went to Aspen every year to ski. They were crazy about each other. The house was filled with laughter. They took biking trips and ski trips around the world, and philanthropy and volunteer service was the cornerstone of their values. Mike taught his children and his grandchildren how to read at a very young age. And their house was always jumping. There were cocktail parties in the 50s and the early 60s. There were always people over. And Mike knew people everywhere, whether in Denver or around the country. My house was always filled with family. His aunt Annie lived next door, and his parents lived just a few. Her parents lived just a few blocks away. They did so much together, except Roz did not like Mike's passion for sailing. To say that she never learned to swim as a child, but she did learn to sail at Heather Ridge. But she only took she took swimming lessons at Heather Ridge, but only the dry dock part because she didn't like the water. From 1968 on, they had their beautiful home in the mountains, and family vacations were always there. But the two of them traveled around the world, and they had so many adventures. Like the time that Bob Lazier drove from Vail in a horrible snowstorm in his sports car to go over Vail Pass. Roz was so upset she almost jumped out of the car. As a father, he taught his children right from wrong. He taught them how to fish, to camp, to hike, to bike, to ski. The boys loved going to the plant over the weekends and play and run around, and the reward was always going out to lunch afterwards at a bar restaurant and watching baseball games and having delicious hamburgers. And all the kids worked at the plant. It was everybody's first summer job. Taught his children and his grandchildren the most important values: honesty, work ethic, education, community. He was informed, all of these were informed by his Jewish values, whether it was the Boards of the Federation, the JCC, the American Jewish Committee, the State of Israel. He formed ISSAMI, the Institute for the Study of the Middle East. He formed the Latino Jewish Coalition and was part of the kitchen cabinet for Federico Pena, part of the America-Israel Friendship League. He supported every organization in the Jewish community. The Southern Poverty Law Center. He insisted that all the children play the piano, although there was a difference between the experience of Jim and Rick and Barbie and Judy. They got twin baby grands. You guys didn't. Sorry. He was always supportive of everything his children cared about, even if he disagreed with some of their choices. He supported them. Bruce, you shared with me how Mike was an entree into the Jewish community for you. He introduced you to everyone, and because of his reputation and relationships, made a huge difference in people getting to know the blessing that you are to us. We've learned about how Mike was Popeye to his grandkids, how he told them jokes even though he told them when he was even annoyed. He went to every show, every graduation. He was proud of every single one. And he skied with them, although he was very upset when the rules were changed after your 70th birthday. You couldn't ski free anymore. He thought that was terrible. We all know that Roz died in 2001 after a long and a difficult illness. For 5 years, he cared for her. He was there with her every step along the way until he eventually had to move her an assisted living residence. It was hard for him, but he couldn't do it all alone. And even when she was near the end, and her physical and mental capacity diminished, it was clear that their love was palpable. He loved her dearly until the very end. Her illness and her death hit him so hard, and he grieved as he watched her decline. And then she was taken away. Christmas Eve in 2001, he went to a party. Small party. There were 21 people there. And there was a woman named Libby Bortz who was there. She was there to meet someone else. And it wasn't a great match. I'm not going to say who it was. So Mike saw this very attractive woman, and he walked over to her and started talking. And as they talked, he opened up about Roz and the decades of love and marriage of the past 5 years, and she was impressed. She thought to herself, this is a good man. Libby always had a New Year's Day party and invited Mike, and he was a big kid. Her kids came over and talked to him. And told Libby, this is a good man. And he invited her out to dinner. And she found out how much he cared about his children and the community, and she said, this is a good man. And then they discovered they both skied together. And they went skiing together, and the first time Mike broke a rib. And the next time he had chest pain, and the next time he fell and broke his leg, and the third time he said, you're not good luck for me. We're not skiing. But the more she got to know him, and the more she saw his love for family, children, and community, the more she realized there was something special and holy about him. She saw the number of lives he touched. She loved how he cared for others and his dedication to the arts and the community. They were married in 2007 by Rabbi Foster. And the ceremony was supposed to have been intimate, just for family members, but of course, we're talking about the Perlmutter family here. For 21 years, shared life together, shared grandchildren, shared love, travel. The past few years, Mike, as we know, faced many health challenges, and I remember visiting in the hospital on several occasions where we thought we were losing him, and Libby, you were always there by his side, taking care of him, ensuring that he knew that he was surrounded by people who he loved and who loved him back. Libby, watching you care for Mike these past few years was so beautiful. So we grieve with all of us, and we grieve with you. That was a fighter to the end. He cheated death several times. He might have lived 400 times. There's a wonderful midrash told of Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, our great teacher. And according to our tradition, Moses had reached the end of his life. His time had come. He climbed to the top of Mount Nebo, and he looked out over the land of Israel, the land that he would never enter, and God was there. And God knew the pain that Moses must have felt at that moment, and they stood there for a while, side by side. Then softly, gently, God spoke to Moses and said, it's time. Moses, your work is done. But Moses turned to God and said, God, I'm not ready to go yet. I want to stay. I can't lead my people into the promised land. Okay, but God, you can do anything. I don't need to go as Moses as their leader. Turn me into a cow. I'll walk with your children. I'll provide them with milk. I'll walk with them into the promised land. But God said, no, Moses, your time's come. And then Moses said, well, if I can't walk with the Israelites, God, make me into a bird. And soar above and watch as they enter into the promised land. But God said, no, Moses, your time has come. And let me be a tree on the banks of the Jordan River that your children might pause for a moment before they cross. Let them be refreshed by my shade and delight in my beauty. And the story goes, God took Moses by the hand and said, come, my child, your work is done. It's time to let go. It's time to come home. You can rest now. Your work is done. The Torah says that Moses died al pi Adonai, by the mouth of God, that God kissed Moses. So God has kissed Mike Altenberg. Mike, like Moses, lived a long and full life, a life of beauty, a life of purpose, and today, as painful as it might be, we acknowledge that his time has come. And so for a life that was so well lived, big shalom to Mike Altenberg, zichrono livracha. May his memory be for an eternal blessing, and let us all say, Amen. Prayer. remarks about not having talked to Jeremy before I was a kid. You have no idea the position I'm in right now. I've been standing too, like all of you. And I didn't check with Rabbi Black. I didn't check with Judy. I didn't check with Jeremy. So I've said this many, many times. And one of the reasons I like to speak last at funerals is because I can throw everything away because everything has meaning to say. True. Lots of laughter, which is wonderful. Libby's asked the cantor and the rabbi to sing a song. They did. She asked me to tell a story. I can't. But she'll understand what victory at sea means. And that's enough of that story. And don't ask her what it means, because she won't tell you anyway, right? It's a difficult time for this family, for all of us who are here to remember Mike. I have lots of wonderful memories. Not any different than the ones that you've already shared. And I'm grateful for all of the times we spent together. I do have to say that yesterday when I met with the family, grandsons were talking about the fact that he really was well dressed. And there were times that he really wanted a black tie or a white tie event. Now everybody thinks, and I'm going to attest to this, everybody thinks that Libby planned their wedding. She did not. Mike did. Now he may have had some footsie for Libby, but he planned it. And every issue was done through Mike. And it couldn't have been a large wedding because the restaurant was a small restaurant. But everything on that menu was chosen by Mike. And if he had the chance, he would have had a black tie on or a white tie. I know you told me, but I'm not going to go through that. You'll remember that. Look, this is a very difficult time for all of us, not just because Mike is gone, but this year has created problems for all of us. And we can learn some lessons at this moment. And that is to rob death of its ultimate victory by living life as long as we have to live it, because that is what he tried to do in his highest moments of living. We can learn by the example that he set for a family. All of the things that have been said, they're also true. And yes, I'm sure that they deserve repetition, but not this moment. But the truth is, he was an example to each of us, no matter how it is that we knew him. An example of how to live life. The joys of life, and the sorrows. The rebuilding of life, and the ways in which we leave memories for those who come after us. I want to read a short poem for you, written by a young man here in Denver when his father died. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem, and I think his dad would love this. It's called The River. The snow melts on the mountain and the water runs down to the spring. In the spring to a turbulent fountain with a song of youth to sing. The water runs down to a riotous river and the river flows to the sea. The sea forms clouds that turn to rain. It falls on the mountain where the snow used to be. And I wonder if life's mystery isn't much like the rain and the snow, returning through all eternity to places it used to know. For life was born on lofty heights and starts like a lapping stream. The river below, whose onward flow ends in a peaceful dream. And so at last, when our life has passed and the river has run its course, the water goes back o'er its natural track to the mountains and the snow of its source.
So why prize life and why fear death, or dread what is to be? The river will run its allotted span, till it reaches the silent sea. The water returned to the mountaintop to begin its course once more. So we shall run the course begun, from now till we reach the shore. Then we visit earth in her pure rebirth, in the heart of the virgin snow. So don't ask why we never die, or whether or when we return. Don't wonder about life's mysteries, or the God's doing. I really do believe that that's what this moment is about. Try to understand what our lives are about. Yes, what his life is about. How we've been influenced by him. How each of us, and I say this especially to the grandchildren, you have all kinds of memories. And if they remain memories only, not good enough. The things that a person who is in the process of dying wants to know, they want others to know. They want them to understand what they live for, what their life is about. They want to know that they made a difference. They want to know that they'll be remembered. Truly, if we remember Mike, people like him, we will try to live by the things that they did. Not just to do it, but to do it in his name. To do it with the thought that he taught us some things. And it doesn't matter whether it's in business or philanthropy or teaching or orchestra, it doesn't matter. As long as we take something from his life and internalize it for ourselves. So I say that the challenge is really to the grandchildren and to the generations that will come after them to teach about this man, because he was really very special. It's in that spirit that I believe that we resolve to face grief without suffering, with bravery and integrity, keeping before us forever the blessings that God conferred upon us in this life that he but lent to us for these many decades. And in a world where our most precious goods are perishable, let's resolve to honor our beloved dead by being so good to the living, so kindly, so understanding, so forgiving, so transcendent of pettiness. And in our love for him, we shall hearken to those who remain and who need us in our strength. May it be through new relationships and new service to humanity that we make good our lives. In the beauty of our own lives, we erect the noblest monument to our more dead. Thus, the beauty of his life shall ever abide among us all as a living and loving benediction. Adonai Natan Adonai Lakach. God has given. God has taken away. Praise be the name of God. Now and forevermore. Let's all sing together. Birth is the beginning, and death is a destination. Life itself is a journey, going, a growing from stage to stage. From childhood to maturity and from youth to age. From innocence to awareness and from ignorance to knowing. From foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom. From weakness to strength, or from strength to weakness, and often back again. Health to sickness, and back we pray to health. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, from grief to understanding, and from fear to faith. From defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but having made the journey stage by stage, sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning. Death is a destination. Life itself is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, made stage by stage, from birth to death. A life that is lasting. Share Yatsara Kemba Zamova Zantri Kera Kemba Diva. Yamita Kemba Din in the Tablet of Hayolam Baruch Atadana. Praise you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe. Forms us in the divine image. He nourishes and sustains us in the goodness, causing all of us to die. Planting immortal life within us. Praise you, God, the judge of truth. Taki Bor Leolam Adonai Rav Laoshia Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayeh Kol Berachamim Rabim. Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim Umatir Asur. Turn unto your might, O God, all life is your gift. Great is your power to save. With love you sustain the living, with great compassion you give life to all. You send help to the fallen and healing to the sick. You bring freedom to the captive and keep faith with those who seek with us. Praise you, O God, for the planet's eternal life. Al Mekomo Yavov Shalom. Michael Altenberg comes to his eternal home. Peace. May the memory of Mike Altenberg endure among us as a blessing. In your own time, O God, when we too are called to enter eternity, may we leave this life pure in the faith that in your life you shall see life, in life and in death you cannot go where you are not, and where you are, open doors. And so sustained by this assurance, we invoke your name, Almighty God, as we rise now, as we are able, for the El Malay Rachamim. El Malay Rachamim, Shochim Bameronim, Amtsei Menucha Nechona, Achat Kanfei HaShechina, Yihim Kedoshim Utehorim, Zor Harakia Mazilim, Et Nishmat Michael Ben Yaakov Golda, Shehalach Le'olamo, Baal HaRachamim, Yasirehu B'Seter Natav Le'olamim, Yitzror B'Tzor HaChayim, Et Nishmato, V'nai V'nachalato, Yanuach B'Shalom, Al Mishkavo V'Nomar Amen. Passionate God, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence. Michael Altenberg, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. Rest in peace. And let us all say amen. May those who mourn the loss of Michael Altenberg find comfort in the hope that though the dust returns to the earth as it was, the spirit returns to God who gave it. Death is not the end. Those who love have passed through the gateway of the grave, the peace of life eternal. We know that all of us must tread the same path, though we know not when that hour may come. And so let us live. The coming of that hour shall find us unafraid. May our deeds do honor to the memory of our beloved life, and you, O God, have taken to yourself. And so, trusting in your wisdom and loving kindness, we praise your name with the words of the mourners.
Yitgadal, v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, v'alma v'yivrach Yehutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'yomechon, v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kari, v'imru amen. V'hei shnei Rabba mevarach, la'alam u'lalmei almaya, Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar, v'yit'aleh, v'yit'alal, shnei v'kudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. V'hei shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. And may the source of peace, who makes peace in places far beyond our knowings, and peace and comfort to the bereaved are among us. And let us all say, amen. My friends, at this time I want to invite members of the immediate family only who wish to place a small amount of earth into the grave. We can't fill the grave because of the rules of our cemetery. However, it's one of the ways that we can contribute and help Mike accompany him on this stage in his journey. I'm going to ask members of the family at this time, the immediate family who wish to place earth in the grave, to do so. We have one more thing to do before we conclude our service. Lech Yisrael Adonai, go your way, for God has called you. Lech Adonai Eimas, go your way, and may God be with you. Halach lefanecha tzidkecha kavod Adonai ya'asrecha. May your righteousness go before you, and the glory of God precede you. And I want to ask now all who are gathered here, repeat these words after me, speaking them to the mourners. May God console you.
May God console you.
All who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem.
Zion and Jerusalem.
My friends, the family has asked that I let you know that they will be sitting a socially distanced Shiva indoors and outdoors at the Altenberg's home today until 4 o'clock, and then resuming Sunday from 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock with a 7 p.m. service. This concludes our service. Thank you all for coming. Judy and Bruce.